The diner was nearly empty that Tuesday morning when Sarah walked in, her small hand clutching her father's fingers. Mark noticed them immediately, the little girl with bright eyes and the weary-looking man who carried the weight of recent grief on his shoulders. Mark and his 4 teammates had stopped for breakfast during their cross-country drive. 5 Navy SEALs temporarily freed from the demands of duty. Sarah's father ordered pancakes for her, coffee for himself. The child's laughter cut through the quiet restaurant as she colored on her placemat, momentarily pulling her father from whatever dark place his mind had wandered. Mark smiled at the sound. After everything they'd seen overseas, a child's innocent joy felt like medicine. When Sarah's crayon rolled off the table and landed near Mark's boot, he picked it up and walked it over to her. She thanked him politely, then her eyes went wide as she spotted the tattoo on his forearm, an eagle clutching a trident, partially visible beneath his rolled sleeve. "My mom had that same tattoo," she said softly. The 5 SEALs froze. The insignia wasn't common. It wasn't something civilians typically wore. Mark's throat tightened as he looked at the little girl, then at her father, whose face had gone pale. "Sarah, sweetheart, go wash your hands," her father said gently. Once she skipped away, he turned to Mark with eyes that held oceans of pain. "My wife was Lieutenant Jessica Reeves. She died 8 months ago in Syria." The name hit Mark like a physical blow. Jessica Reeves. He'd never met her, but he knew the story. Every SEAL knew the story. She'd been part of a joint task force, one of the few women to earn the trident, and she'd died shielding 3 wounded soldiers from enemy fire. She'd held that position for 40 minutes, injured herself, until extraction arrived. Those 3 soldiers lived. She didn't make it home. Mark's team leader Derek stood and approached one by one. All 5 SEALs gathered around the table. They introduced themselves, and Jessica's husband, Tom, shook each hand with quiet dignity. "She talked about you all," Tom said, his voice breaking slightly, "not by name, but the brotherhood. She said it was the thing she was most proud of, being part of something bigger than herself." He glanced toward the restroom where Sarah had disappeared. "I haven't told her everything yet. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that her mother was a hero when all she wants is her mom back?" Derek, the oldest among them and a father himself, sat down across from Tom. "You tell her the truth, when she's ready. You tell her that her mother loved her enough to fight for a world where she could grow up safe. And you tell her she's never alone." Over the next hour, the SEALs and Tom shared stories. They told him about the legacy Jessica had left in the teams, how her name was spoken with reverence, how young female recruits now had her photograph on their walls. Tom told them about Sarah's nightmares, about his own struggle to be both parents, about the crushing loneliness of military widowhood. When Sarah returned, she crawled into her father's lap, and Mark made a decision. He pulled out his phone and made a call, then another, and another. 2 weeks later, Tom received an envelope. Inside was a letter signed by 47 Navy SEALs, men and women who had known Jessica or knew of her sacrifice. Each had written a message for Sarah to read when she was older, telling her about her mother's courage, strength, and kindness. Enclosed were photographs, commendations, and stories that painted a picture of the warrior and the woman Jessica had been. But there was something else: a trust fund. The SEALs had rallied their community, and contributions had poured in. It wasn't about charity. It was about family taking care of family. The fund would ensure Sarah's education, that she'd have opportunities her mother had fought to protect. Years later, Sarah would stand at her college graduation, a political science major preparing for law school, wearing her mother's trident on a chain around her neck. Tom would be in the audience, no longer alone, surrounded by the brothers and sisters in arms who had become their extended family. That morning in the diner, when Sarah had innocently pointed at a tattoo, she'd unknowingly connected her father to a lifeline he desperately needed. She'd reminded 5 warriors why they served, and they'd reminded a grieving widower that sacrifice is never forgotten, that heroes never truly die, and that the families left behind are held forever in the arms of the brotherhood. Some tattoos marked the skin, others marked the soul. Jessica's had done both.